did I leave this slide blank intentionally or unintentionally? Okay, you said both? Okay, I guess you can't be wrong. So, I give you one.
Thank you.
You get one. So I left it blank intentionally. Can anybody tell me what a blank slide represents?
Fresh start.
My man. You get one. So that's the first point that I want to make is that, you know, each day you get a fresh start, and the choices that you made in the prior day really no longer matter. It's all about what you do in the present moment. You get to shape your existence each and every day with the choices that you make. And one thing that my mother used to always tell me was that if you don't become a success in life, it's entirely your fault. And so you have to get to a place where you take ownership for your own success, and you're willing to tell yourself that if I don't get to where I want to be, it's on me and nobody else. And so if you don't remember anything else that I say today, I want you to at least remember that. So with that being said, as Fred mentioned, my name is Taron Ragan. I was in your seats about 2 years ago. I was taking Fred's class, and we were actually in the Perlman building. And I currently work for Deloitte, as Fred mentioned, in the audit and insurance practice. And I've had a pretty unique experience so far. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't pick different clients. I wouldn't change anything. I'm fortunate to serve clients within the real estate industry and also in the manufacturing industry. And a unique thing about the real estate client that I've been able to serve is that it's a multi-billion-dollar real estate company, and they actually happen to be going through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy restructuring. So I got to see a multi-billion-dollar company restructuring just about everything. And of course, there were challenging times, challenging moments, but those are the types of engagements where you learn the most and you really accelerate your career. In addition to the real estate industry, I've also been fortunate to work on clients in the manufacturing industry. And my main client is a large multi-billion-dollar company based in Japan. And I happen to be the only person on my team that's not Japanese, so it's a pretty cool experience getting to know them and their culture, how they operate, and just being able to enhance my skill set as far as working with people who are different from me. So in addition to that, Fred also mentioned I wrote my first book, Mindset Shift. I released it last May, and it actually reached number 4 on the bestsellers list. And that's something that I could have never predicted to happen, but one of Fred's close friends, Bill McKay, he told me, he said, well, if you want to write a book, Taron, you don't have to write a dictionary. It can be something simple to the point. And so, as you can see, it's not a 200, 300-page book, and we put it together, and it became an Amazon bestseller. I'm also involved with the National Association of Black Accountants Atlanta chapter, as well as the IA Atlanta's mentoring program. And I do stuff like this quite often, speaking to students and young professionals. So, just to get into some of my early life and my childhood, I think I was like 3 years old on this picture, but I grew up in Fort Valley, Georgia, and as I began sharing a bit about my childhood experiences, I like to start by saying that there's one thing that's self-evident, and it's that we will all come up against a challenge. We will all face challenges. It's inevitable, and we'll all face ups and downs. We'll all face twists and turns. But these are the moments where you learn the most. These are the moments where you grow the most. And as my father-in-law would say, these are the moments where you build character. So I encourage you, whenever you come up against a challenge, just to view it as something that can help you grow and to become a better person, a better student, better at your job, whatever it is that you do. And these are the moments where you find the most wisdom. So I challenge you from this day forward to lean into the challenges that you have come your way, and you'll thank yourself for doing that. You'll not be perfect at it, but if you get slightly better, and I'm sure y'all probably heard, if you get 1% better each day, you got the job done. So in my life, I've personally seen these challenges time and time again, and I won't share them all. I will share a few today, and I'll share some of the moments that I feel really helped shape me into the person that I am today. And as I said earlier, I wouldn't change them if I had the opportunity to do so. I feel like these were very pivotal moments that really helped me to grow. And I also end by sharing a few lessons that I've learned along the way that can help you as you progress through your careers and in life. So as I said, I grew up in Fort Valley, Georgia, a place known for peaches and football. It's located in Peach County, Georgia, so around my hometown is a bunch of peach trees. And just about every kid in my hometown's dream is to go to the NFL. And so my hometown is like a big football town. So my family, and family is one of the most important things to me, and we always had love, we had integrity, but the thing that we didn't have was finances. We didn't really have money, and this impacted us in a lot of ways, and it really inspired me to want to be a better person and want to be the person that changed my family dynamic and created a sustainable future for my children, for my grandchildren, so that they don't have to go through some of the situations that I had to go through. And one of the most pivotal moments, and I thought this was fitting for me to share today, but one of the most pivotal moments that I had as a child was going to work with my grandmother on Saturdays and Sundays, and she started her career picking weeds out of cotton fields and peach fields. And she ended up working her way up to permanent full-time employee in the animal science department at Fort Valley State University. And she also eventually worked her way into becoming an independent contractor, where she was charged with just making organic soap out of the milk that was left over from the goats. And so that was her job. But when I would go to work with her, she was still like tending to the animals. And so when I would go, she would have me make sure that the baby goats were fed, and I would have to clean up after them and clean up after the older goats. And I really thought that this was fitting because today actually marks the 1-year anniversary since I lost her, and it was not planned this way. Fred picked this day, and so I thought about it this morning. I was like, it's kind of crazy how he picked, out of all days, he picked that day. And so she really helped shape me into the man that I am today. And so I thought it was very fitting to mention her today. And so moving on throughout my childhood, I faced many bumps and bruises. I told y'all that just about every kid in my hometown wanted to go to the NFL, and I wasn't exempt from that. I had NFL dreams for a long time. My very first season of football, I actually ended up winning Offensive Player of the Year, and after I got the trophy, I had people asking me, what college do you want to go to? University of Florida, University of Georgia. And I just knew the NFL was in my future. But I made it to high school, and my sophomore year, the Clemson football coach was like to my left. He was like scouting our team, and I tore my ACL right there in front of him. And that was the moment when I started to, I guess this was my first mindset shift where I started thinking more about business rather than going and being an NFL player. And shortly after tearing my ACL, I actually tore my meniscus, and so at that point I was like, the NFL is over. So those were some of the most pivotal moments that initially started to change my mindset and started to look at business as, a future career path. Some of the other challenges that I faced growing up, I remember living in a house in my hometown, and the ceiling, one day, it just fell in on the bed that my brother and I were sharing, and we ended up having to sleep on the same bed that night. I remember living in a house where if you moved the refrigerator, you could see underneath the house. And I remember, and it's funny now that I think back on it, I remember me running across the room with a trash can to catch a rat that came from under the refrigerator, and my grandma finished him off. And so, these were some of the challenges that I faced as a child and as a teenager. But as I stated, one of the things that my family always had was love. We had character. We had the integrity to treat people right and treat them as we wanted to be treated. And the next pivotal moment that happened in my childhood was my father. He actually went to prison when I was somewhere between 3 and 5 years old. I don't remember exactly, but he was in prison for about 6 to 7 years. And he would always write us and send us cards where he drew pictures and he expressed his love for us. And I remember when he got out, we were the first people that he came to see. And we got really, really close over the course of that 1 year. We were training together. We were spending just about every day together. But I remember it was Labor Day of 2009, and I was sitting at the table with my family, and we were eating. We had barbecued, and I probably had a rib or something in my mouth. But we were sitting at the table, and my mother, she got a phone call from my aunt, and she just started crying. And I knew it was bad news, and she told us that my father had been shot in the heart, and he passed on Labor Day of 2009. But one of the things that he made me promise before he passed was he made me promise that I would make better choices than he made in his life, and that I would go on to be a better man than he was. And so I felt that even though he was not here anymore, it was still important to me to keep my word with him and to keep that promise that I had made to him. At the time, I felt all kinds of emotions. I felt confusion, frustration, I felt anger. I really didn't know how to feel at times, but I knew I had to step up and just be kind of like the man in my family and want to change our dynamic and move everything forward. So I always knew that I was going to go to college. I knew that school was, kind of my thing. I was always good at it, even though I didn't always realize it. And it was somewhat rooted in the feeling that I wanted to be the man of my family and wanted to do something different and make a change for me and my family members. But coming to college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. But I knew one thing was self-evident, and that was why I was here. And that was to make a better life for myself and for those who would come after me. And in the process, it actually inspired my family members to make a better life for themselves. So, as I said, I was here to be the change that I wanted to be in my family. See, the what I was going to do and the how I was going to do it, I didn't know. But if you know why, that's always enough to keep you going. And most times, the what and the how end up working themselves out. So, why, what, and how can be a formidable force when you have all three, but just remember that you only need to know why at times in order to keep moving forward. For a long time, I would ask myself, what am I doing here? Why am I in school? What am I working towards? I didn't know what kind of career path I wanted to go on. I think I had 4 or 5 different majors. Luckily, as Fred said, I met my wife by switching to one of those majors for 1 semester, and I don't even think I passed that class.
You had something else on your mind.
Yeah. And so, I would ask myself, what am I doing here? And the answer that I would give myself is to show people back home and to show people like me that we can be something other than a football player. And just to be that example and to inspire positive change for those around me. And for me, life was, is, and still is all about just inspiring other people. And it's always going to be bigger than just one individual. and I always looked at life as something that was bigger than me. And at the end of the day, the only thing that we have when you strip away all of the material things is the impact that you make when you leave this earth. That's what will be remembered when your name gets called. You will be remembered for how you touch other people, how you inspire other people, how you help other people. And so I challenge you to think about when you go home and like, what kind of impact will I make in this world? So on my first day of college, it was rough. I remember leaving the parking lot next to the rec center, right in front of the bookstore. I think it's the bookstore. And at that time, they would have actual guards inside of that guard shack. And so when I went into the parking lot, they redirected us to leave and go to, I forget what it's called, but it's the on-campus housing. I think it's like closest to like what's the student housing on Freight Road? It's
University Village?
Yeah, it was University Village. Okay, there we go. So yeah, they redirected us to leave and go to University Village, and so I was so focused on following my mother that when the guard let the gate up to let her out, I just kept going, and like I crashed into that gate, and I took it with me a few yards. And like, yeah, and they called the campus police, and I'm like, I'm going to jail on my first day in college. And they ended up giving me a slap on the wrist. They said, don't do it again. I didn't get a fine or anything. And it was all good. But it's a funny story when I look back on it now. But I also remember on that same day not being allowed to receive my keys to my apartment because we didn't pay the rent before we got here. And so my grandmother actually like gave me her last, down to the last penny, to pay my rent on that day. And I got my keys and I moved in and I started college. So that was my first day. Starting college was a big moment. Everybody was crying, but it was an important step, and I believe the most important step in anything is the first step. And I had a mentor who would tell me the best time to start something is yesterday, because the sooner you get started, the closer you'll be to reaching that goal that you set for yourself. So I remember also not being able to afford to buy myself new clothes. And I had one pair of black shoes, and I bought it intentionally so that it matched with a bunch of stuff. I had one pair of black sweatpants, and I'm looking down, I realize I'm dressed like that now. But I had one pair of black sweats. The black sweats had a hole, like it was a small hole, about right here. And I would just switch out my t-shirts to make it look like I was wearing different outfits every day. And I still wonder to this day, if my classmates ever noticed, he had the same hole in his pants every day. So I remember that part of my college experience. I continued to move forward through college, and in my second semester, my younger brother actually sustained brain damage, and this was in the spring of 2016. And so I spent that entire semester going to class during the day. I would get out of class at 4:45, and I would head straight to the Children's Hospital in Atlanta. And I would be there from probably 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night every day with my family. And at that time, I had professors telling me, it's okay, you can take an academic pause, you can leave and try school again later. But I didn't want to do that. And I got through the semester with C's and I think maybe 1B. And you know, looking back, I'm so glad I didn't take that pause. And the doctors were telling my family that my little brother, he wouldn't make it out of the hospital. And to make a long story short, he did end up getting out of the hospital. And he made a miraculous recovery that no one could have predicted. And that was even more inspiration for me to keep going. So I continued to move through my college experience. And the spring of 2017 rolled around, and financial struggles started to kick in, and I couldn't afford to pay for the place that I was living in. I was working at Panda Express, and I was making probably $600 a month and living partly on student loans. And I ended up getting evicted from Stadium Village, where I lived at the time, spring of 2017. Shortly before that, I had a car that my grandmother was allowing me to use, and her independent contractor's role for Fort Valley State. She actually went through hard times, and she started losing her contracts, and she could no longer support me. So I got evicted from my apartment, and I also had the car that I was driving repossessed while everybody was getting on the Bob bus to go to campus. And at that point, I became a commuter student. Shortly after, I got this blue car that you see on the screen. I thought it was like the best car in the world. I felt so cool pulling up in it. And I became a commuter student fall of 2017, and that lasted until next semester, when I got into a car accident on a rainy night, and I crashed this car into a cement wall. And at that point, I was living, it would have taken me 3-4 hours by bus to get from my mother's house to Kennesaw. So the day would have been over by the time I got here. So that wasn't an option. And so my only option was to ask my mother if she could just drop me off in Kennesaw, and I figured out from there. So I packed up a book bag, I packed up my suitcase, and she dropped me off in Kennesaw. And I had a couple of friends that they had my back during that time, and I'm forever grateful to them. And I always mention them in these speeches. But I spent that entire semester just bouncing from place to place. At times I didn't have anywhere to go. I remember sitting outside sometimes and having somebody that I know come past and ask me, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then I tell them, and they're like, "Well, just come stay with me for a night." And it was a tough time, but I feel like that semester was the semester that truly made me into the man that I am today. I remember nights where I worked at Panda Express, and I would have to walk back and forth, and I would come back to my friend's house where my clothes were, and they wouldn't be home, and my clothes would be locked inside of the apartment, so I couldn't get to them, and I'd have to wear the same orange chicken teriyaki smelling clothes the next day. And it was a tough time, but there were two bright lights in that semester. That was the semester where I met my wife, and that was the semester where I actually successfully orchestrated an event for the homeless, which I was planning before I crashed my car. And so I feel like, looking back, that happened to me so that I could be more passionate about putting that event together. And we ended up feeding over 50 homeless people. We had 2 barbers that came and gave them haircuts, getting them ready for job interviews. We got so many clothes donated, and I remember many nights where I had trash bags of clothes, donated clothes over my shoulders, traveling on the Bob back to a friend's house. And that's a day that I'll never remember, or I'll never forget. I'll never forget. And so it was just kind of, I was thinking about that earlier, and it was just kind of funny how things ended up working out. So when the fall of 2018 rolled around, things started to kind of trend up for me. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I took a job as a forklift operator, and I was going to be paid the most money I'd ever made, and I moved to Kennesaw permanently. And the place that I moved to was the In Town Suites Extended Stay Hotel, and I eventually bought myself an old, 2002 Honda Accord, and it got the job done. It got me where I needed to be. And it wasn't until the spring of 2019 when I started to find my career path and the direction that I wanted to go as far as my major in college. And the one thing that I wanted to do with my life. So I was taking my managerial accounting course, which most of y'all have already probably taken, I'm sure. And my professor, she taught accounting to me in a way where I just understood it. And she told me accounting is the language of business. And I didn't mention this part of me, but throughout my life, I have started a bunch of businesses. So I've always been passionate about business and starting my own business, and I have an entrepreneurial spirit. So when she told me that accounting is the language of business, I was sold. And I ended up going to meet the firms in spring of 2019. I talked to a lot of professionals, and I eventually decided that accounting was the major for me. And so I switched my major to accounting that semester. But at the time, after having went through a lot of the challenges that I went through, my GPA was like a 2.29. And so I would apply to internships, and I got at least 20 rejections before I ended up getting my first internship offer. And the way that I got my first internship offer was through something that my wife told me. So she got an internship before me, and she was working at State Farm, and they had a guest speaker come and speak to her intern class, and he told them, he said, if you get rejections for internships or jobs, never just take the rejection and leave it. He said, you always follow up and ask, what can I do better to be more qualified for the position next time? And I had just received a rejection, and I followed up with that exact same message that he told her internship class, and I got a phone call from that company 30 minutes later. Well, I didn't get an internship offer that same day, but she told me, well, we can't offer you anything right now because the event is full, but never say never, you never know what will happen. 2 days before the event, I got another call from that company, and they said, we had one person who decided that they couldn't make it to the event, and so we have an open ticket, and they gave it to me. And long story short, that ended up turning into my first internship offer. And I would say one thing that I learned in that moment was just being authentic and really sharing who I am as a person. And I think when you do that, it really helps people to really get to know you and want to be there for you and to support you and guide you and help you in your career. And so the combination of just resilience to not accept the rejection for what it was, and to also be authentic with the recruiter, was what I think ultimately landed me that opportunity. And earlier, I said I bought a Honda Accord. It was like a 2001. And so shortly before this internship was set to start, I was without a car again. Still had a place. I was doing fine. I just didn't have a car. And I had to figure out how I would get back and forth from my internship. And it was in Dunwoody. And so I sat down and I planned out my bus route to and from my work location. And it would have taken me about an hour to get there, an hour to get back. So that wasn't too bad. But a few months after landing my internship, my younger brother, who had made it out of the hospital 3 years earlier, he actually passed away. So I decided that I would dedicate my internship to him. And so 2 weeks before the internship started, the location for training changed. And so I had to sit down again and figure out, how am I going to get to training? And I knew that I had to get there because this was, for me, it was non-negotiable. It was a moment that I knew could and would change my life forever. And so I sat down again and I mapped out my bus route, and the training location was changed to Johns Creek. And so when I sat down and looked at the bus routes, the only routes that would get me there on time started at 4:30 in the morning, and I had to take 3 buses and a train to get there. And so I didn't realize I had to take the train until I got to the train station. I thought it was 4 buses, but I took my first 2 buses, and the third stop was the train station. So I had to teach myself how to catch the train on the fly. And if I missed the train, then I'd be late to training, and I just couldn't miss the train. So I taught myself how to catch the train on the fly, and I caught the train to my last bus stop. And during the process, I had my suitcase, and I had my handle out, and I was rolling it across the street. My handle broke off, so I had to carry my suitcase the whole way. It's funny when I look back on these things now, but I ended up getting to training on time. I actually got there about 30 minutes early, and they said Taron is here early, he's ready to go. And I said, yeah.